we're doing COVID Fast Five. Jennifer, I'm going to go ahead and start with the first story, and then away we're going to go to the races. The United States once again finds itself at a COVID crossroads. After weeks of progress where new cases have dropped to about 70,000 a day and deaths to 2,000 a day, 29 states are now reporting an increase in new COVID cases. The increase is happening as the nation seems to just be accepting that 2,000 people dying a day, 60,000 a month, 720,000 a year is just acceptable. The trend of increasing infections isn't just a United States issue. It is globally starting to go up. Here in the U.S., increased case counts are being attributed to multiple states relaxing rules too soon and too aggressively, and the appearance of more contagious variants from Britain, South Africa, and the West Coast variant that came out of California. There is a glimmer of good news in this. The number of hospitals reporting ICUs at or over capacity are down 50%.
Yeah, I mean, that's good news. But again, like we talked a little while ago about the relaxing of things and people just kind of getting used to living with COVID. We've talked too about how UW students in particular have not been good at adhering to public health mandates, and we're about to come up on spring break. And, you know, people are going to want to go sunny, warm places during spring break. And a lot of those sunny, warm places rely on tourist money to support their economy. And so I'm curious to see if we're going to have an increase in cases again a couple weeks after the traditional spring break period.
And Jennifer, in that same vein, the Biden administration announced today that the TSA is going to be hiring 6,000 more screeners in anticipation of an increase in air traffic coming this spring and summer. And with that, you can take us to story number 2.
All right. So the Johnson & Johnson single-dose vaccine received emergency approval for use in the United States and is considered a game changer. The vaccine was developed in part by the now defunct Operation Warp Speed, started by former social media icon Donald Trump. The efficacy is lower than the two-dose alternatives, ranging from 66 to 82%, depending on the country it was tested in. On the other hand, it can last for 3 months when stored from 36 to 46 degrees, and no longer when stored from -13 to 5 degrees, no longer needing stored at that temperature. The United States is now vaccinating 2.4 million people per day, although that includes first and second dose recipients. If that rate continues, the Biden administration will easily meet its target of 150 million doses administered during his first 100 days in office.
Yeah, at 2.4 million a day, Jennifer, you could just do the math in your head and write rough math is 25 million every 10 days. So 40 days is 100 million, rough math. They've already got 50 million, so that gives them 18 days of wiggle. And they just have to hold the line at the 2.4 million doses. But again, there's some criticism on that number. He initially said 100 million. He got roasted on the 100 million number. They moved it to 150 million. There are other people that are saying, no, it should be more aggressive than that. But there is this small little issue of the Trump administration losing like 20 million doses and the cupboard's not having any reserve of vaccines or any plan to speak of for the distribution thereof.
I feel like we should say losing in air quotes in reference to the lost.
Losing. They lost. On the subject of loss, let's talk about the Seahawks. I'm sorry. Everyone knows I'm a Patriots fan, so and the Patriots did worse, so don't be a hater on that. Seahawks fans have had a rough 2021 between the short playoff run, Chad Wheeler, Russell Wilson unhappiness rumors, and the Clink being renamed to Lumen Field. Lumen Field will be the site of Seattle's first mass vaccination site, while many other cities already have mass vaccination sites, such as Houston Minute Maid Field, where people waiting to get their shots were literally standing over the Houston Astros playing preseason baseball below. Like so many other Seattle plans that Mayor Durkin has announced during her tenure, no data's been announced, nor is there any logistical plan shared. Part of the problem of the city's defense is what we just talked about, a shortage of vaccinations. At its peak, the CenturyLink Field, Lumen Field, will be able to vaccinate about 21,000 people a day.
Yeah. that's great. I'm sorry. I think like it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I know we're talking about COVID, but I just feel like it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if Russell Wilson went elsewhere. Like I'm just gonna leave that there. I'm probably gonna get like hate mail and people are gonna be really upset about that. But he played like shit the second half of the season. And his salary is insane. And we could use some money to build up the rest of the freaking team because Russell Wilson isn't the entire team. So I'm okay.
All right, so I'm going to jump. We're going to sidebar on this for a couple of seconds. I actually don't blame Russell Wilson for being unhappy. I say this completely objectively because Russell Wilson has spent far too much time for the caliber quarterback that he is, running for his life and looking up flattened on the ground with 5 people on top of him. The O-line has been an incredible problem for the Seahawks for years. And quite frankly, I'm surprised that Russell Wilson has put up with it up to this point.
I agree with that, but look at his salary. How are they supposed to bring in decent players when so much of the salary cap is dedicated to Russell Wilson? Like, what are you supposed to do?
Well, and this is one thing that I'm going to say and believe me, the more the chuddishness
Chud. It's a cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller.
Of Tom Brady comes out, the more I'm just like, oh, this is just so gross. But God, he 6 rings for the Patriots, but it's so gross. But one thing that I do think Jennifer that Tom Brady has right, he's never taken a big salary. He's one of the middle paid players because I think Tom was able to look at the big picture and go, if I put less money on my pocket, I could be surrounded by more weapons. And I say weapons metaphorically, and I get to shine. And we saw that in the Patriots way. And we saw that this year down in Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. He's like, yeah. All right, Jennifer. Story number 4.
Okay, so the Black community continues to suffer the impacts of COVID disproportionately at all levels. Blacks leading confirmed cases, hospitalizations, and deaths at a disproportionate level compared to other races. When it comes to immunizations, only 5 states, Maine, Massachusetts, Oregon, Utah, and West Virginia, are showing that racial equality is being maintained. The news isn't all that good, however. Maine, Oregon, and Utah's Black population only represents 1% of the total population in each state, making equity a lot easier to achieve. West Virginia is 3% Black and Massachusetts is 7%. States with the worst racial inequity include Delaware, Florida, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Missouri, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, and our own state of Washington. It is worth noting there is no correlation between red state versus blue state, Republican governor versus Democratic governor, advanced policies on COVID response, or almost no policy at all. Also worth noting that not all states, such as South Dakota, Idaho, North Dakota, and Montana, are sharing racial equality data for COVID vaccine distribution. I feel like I should have turned that into a song.
Could do Tom Lehrer the elements to the states. We're just going to keep calling out the inequity. And if you're one of those people, you're just dividing people by calling this stuff out. No, it's just making you uncomfortable. And that's why you don't want us to call us out. It's not dividing people because if no one talks about it, it's not going to get fixed. And, you know, there are reasons why some of these states only have a 1% population of people that are Black. It's because Black people weren't welcomed in those states in the first place. Washington State, that's one of the states that has kind of that ugly history. So does Oregon.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when your population is only 1%, it's pretty easy to vaccinate 1% piece, right? When you look at if you jab 100 people and one of them's Black and your overall population is 1% Black and you're targeting urban areas first, guess what? Pretty easy to hit your 1%. There's only 5 states. And, you know, as you called out in that story, there's a number of states that are not even tracking the data. What a shock. Says no one ever.
Yep.
Do better.
Yes.
All right. A year after the first COVID death was reported out of Kirkland, Washington, where we're headquartered out of, our state's going to breach 5,000 COVID deaths this week. A year later, we're at 4,956. They would have updated that number before we went on the air. Our run rate is somewhere between 15 and 20. So conservatively, we're around 4970 right now. I don't know what the exact number. If you know the exact number, pop it in the comments. Like many other states where cases and hospitalizations have dropped, the progress is hitting a plateau. We're settling in at around 20 deaths a day, which is about 600 a month or 7,200 a year. Governor Inslee has announced a pause of level 2 reopenings, which has created some degree of normalcy. Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent and I are guilty of going into a restaurant and eating in an act of normalcy. We did it when there was only two other small couples at tables, and we were able to be far away from everyone else. And Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent is fully vaccinated. My ass is still swinging in the wind. Schools are starting to reopen for younger students. For older students, a growing list of school districts are saying it is not happening until fall of 2020, or at least hinting that that's where they're at. Washington continues to lead the United States for mask compliance. We're at about 83%. However, that gap is closing. The United States average is inching up to 80% as more and more people are being directly or indirectly impacted by COVID. What an amazing idea, Jennifer, when you have about 510,000 people that have died and 2,000 people dying a day. Even the COVID deniers are starting to go, wow, this person died, that person died, my mother died. Maybe the people who are telling me this was a hoax have actually been lying to me this whole friggin' time. And they're starting to wear masks. We'll be reporting, I think, Jennifer, on COVID at least once a week.
Yep.
For probably all of the next 52 weeks.
Yep. I agree.